True Crime Brewery contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Medical information is opinion based on facts of a crime and should not be interpreted as medical advice or treatment. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to True Crime Brewery. I'm Jill.
And I'm Dick.
Amy St Laurent went out on a Saturday night and just seemed to vanish into thin air. As parents, this is our worst nightmare. Amy was a sensible, smart young woman who knew how to take care of herself, but one bad choice put her into the path of a violent predator. In the search for Amy, detectives had to deal with uncooperative witnesses, inaccurate stories, and a suspect who wove a complex web of lies. As time passed with no sign of Amy, her family had to accept a terrible fact. Amy was never coming home. Join us at the quiet end today for Finding Amy St Laurent. What happened to Amy is tragically something that happens all too often. Sometimes a monster can present himself as a charming and fun guy while out in the public. Then, when he isolates his victim and his violent and murderous true self emerges, it's too late to escape. So it's a fascinating story. What do we have for a beer?
We have a beer brewed in Portland, Maine. It's called Epiphany. It's by the Foundation Brewing Company. Very nice brewer. Very nice beer. It's a New England IPA. Alcohol by volume is 8%. Beer is a hazy gold color. It's got a small, kind of ivory-colored head. A lot of lacing. Nice aroma, citrus and tropical fruits. A little bit of pine. Taste is where it all comes through. Orange, grapefruit, mango, papaya, a little bit of pine late. Not too much. So you would like this, Jill?
All right, well, let's open it up and give it a try.
Okay. We'll take it down to our virtual quiet end, seeing as how we're quarantining ourselves.
Yeah, it's a little different, but just as quiet.
It's our real quiet
It's
end.
really quiet, yes.
Portland is Maine's largest city. Now, the population that live in Portland is around 70,000. But weekends, particularly in the evening, the population can more than double to about 150,000 people. Now, the Old Port area, where everybody likes to go on weekends, this is an area located on a peninsula surrounded by Casco Bay, the Fore River, Back Cove, and the harbor. This area was once a popular port with quaint brick storefronts, warehouses, and thriving department stores and businesses. By 1970, though, it was hit hard by the decline of small manufacturing. Many of the warehouse buildings near the waterfront were abandoned or condemned. Just at this time, people recognized that this was going to be a burgeoning area, so developers started buying buildings and started to restore the Old Port area. At the time of Amy's disappearance, Old Port had become popular with young people from the surrounding areas. Couples would come to the Old Port to enjoy fine restaurants, live music, theater production. At night, though, it was more of a destination for the youngsters. Fights were common. Crowd control was definitely an issue. And late at night, when the bars and clubs closed, thousands of people who were drunk and rowdy would fill the narrow streets. Police officers were ready, moving people along and clearing the streets, hopefully before fights could erupt. But it was sometimes not a good place to be.
Well, definitely you needed to be careful there. Of course, we've been there. We're from Maine, so we know.
We know.
Yeah. So it was Saturday night, October 20th, 2001, when Amy went to the Old Port with an acquaintance visiting from Florida. She called her mother between 10 and 10:30 p.m., telling her that she was on the way to Portland from her South Berwick home. She invited her mother to meet them for drinks, but she declined. She was already in her pajamas. Amy was in a car driven by a guy named Eric Rubright, a man from Florida who she'd just met about 3 weeks earlier. Amy had been visiting a friend in Fort Myers, Florida, and that's when she met Rubright. He'd flown into Portland that Thursday night, rented a car, and had driven to meet Amy. From most reports, Rubright was romantically interested in Amy, but Amy was more like just being polite and friendly. She had recently broken up with her long-term boyfriend, Richard Sparrow.
Yeah, this guy, Rubright, was taken by Amy and really wanted to pursue her romantically. But from what we've learned and read, she wasn't interested in him.
Not in that way.
Not in that way.
Right.
And she invited him up, I guess, because she felt kind of beholden to him. He had taken her around in Florida and had been a good guy, so I think she sort of felt, maybe not an obligation, but felt like she ought to do something for him. So up he came to visit.
Sure. So it wasn't unusual for her, an attractive 25-year-old, to go out on Saturday and not come home that night. But for Amy, this was unusual. She wasn't the type of person who just went out and hooked up with someone overnight. She was pretty sensible, and she was a very devoted cat owner. So she'd never leave the cat without food and water overnight unless she had someone to take care of it. Because of this cat, she rarely stayed at her mother's South Portland house overnight either. And if she did stay overnight somewhere, she always had gone home first thing in the morning to check on the cat, or she'd arranged for someone else to feed and check on the cat for her. And it was even more unusual for Amy to let days go by without a call to her mother or to her younger sister Julie. Amy always had her cell phone with her. She was of that generation, and she was in touch with family and friends every day by phone or email. She was very close to her mom, Diane, and her younger sister, Julie, and she was also pretty close to her father, Dennis, who lived near her in South Berwick because her parents were divorced.
But Amy didn't go home or call anyone for a couple days. So Saturday, Sunday, no sign of her. She failed to show up for work on Monday morning. That's when her family went from being concerned or mildly concerned to alarmed. Amy hadn't gone to college, but she was an ambitious woman who had worked her way up from the assembly line to an administrative position at Pratt & Whitney. This is an aircraft engine assembly plant, and it's up in the Berwick area, which is where she was living. On the rare occasion when she had to miss a day of work, she always called to let somebody know.
Yeah, she had been an honors student in high school, actually, and she was very professional when it came to her career. She'd been employed at Pratt & Whitney for about 5 years, and she'd moved from the Portland area to South Berwick, mainly to be closer to her job. She was very happy about her recent promotion to administrative assistant and seemed to really enjoy her job. She was also saving up money to buy her own home. She had an important presentation due the next day, that Tuesday, and she was excited about this, and she'd been working on it every day. But now she doesn't show up for work Monday morning. It just didn't make sense. So, like I said, her mom was alarmed at this point.
Certainly was, because this is just so totally out of character for Amy.
Absolutely.
So the police checked car rental agencies at the Portland airport to see if Eric Rubright had rented a car. And he had, in fact, rented a maroon GMC Envoy with an OnStar system. Through the South Berwick Police Department, who was searching for Amy, OnStar was contacted, and the rental truck was located parked in downtown Portland.
Yeah, so a patrol unit watched the car until Rubright could be contacted. And on Monday night, Amy's parents had already contacted the South Berwick police. She never went to work that day, never answered her phone. They were so alarmed by this point that her mother Diane, her younger sister Julie, and even her ex-boyfriend Richard Sparrow spent all day Monday putting up posters with Amy's picture and her description all around the city. Under the bold heading Missing, since Saturday night 10/20/01, there were pictures of the smiling, blonde, blue-eyed Amy, and they were on poles and in storefronts all over Portland. The posters asked anyone who had seen her to contact her family or the South Berwick police.
Now, at 10:30 Monday night, Eric Rubright walked up to the police officers who were watching his rental car and identified himself. He told them that he had just seen a poster with Amy's picture, and he had just called the South Berwick police and offered to tell them what he knew. Now, he had been drinking. He agreed to go to the Portland Police Department and talk rather than driving the 40 miles to South Berwick.
Sure. Now, he was drinking, but he was on vacation, right?
Right.
And it was nighttime, so it wasn't that unusual. But of course, the police are suspicious of him right off.
Well, he's the guy she was out with, right?
Right.
And
she didn't really know him that well.
She didn't. It's a guy that you want to follow up with.
Right. I mean, her family and friends didn't know him at all. So in a recorded interview at the Portland Police Department, Rubright told detectives that he had met Amy 3 weeks earlier in Florida through a mutual friend who she was visiting. And he had decided to visit Maine and see Amy because he was already planning to visit his grandmother in New York. He told the detectives that Amy had been a totally cool girl, a totally cool human being, and he had wanted to see her again, definitely liked her. So he'd arrived on Thursday, and on Saturday they'd gone to Boston and visited the Museum of Fine Arts. They had dinner in Boston, and later that evening, that's when they decided to drive to the Old Port section of Portland and she could show him around. So they drove directly from Boston to Portland without stopping at Amy's house in South Berwick that Saturday night. And on the way, he said, Amy had called her mother in South Portland and invited her to join them. So that all matched what Amy's mother had told the police.
Sure did. Now, once in Portland, the first stop for Amy and Rubright was the Foreplay Sports Bar. So while they were there, Rubright drank some beer and Amy played pool. He didn't play pool. So Amy had played with some men she didn't know. While they were there, another guy approached Amy. Rubright described this guy as about 5'8", 160 pounds with dyed blonde hair and brown roots. The new guy, according to Rubright, played like a pool shark. And he had given Amy his phone number and left with an overweight friend that Rubright had trouble describing. He said he really hadn't paid that much attention to the other guy.
No, because I figure he was probably jealous of the first one that she was hitting it off with and who she took his phone number.
He's going to keep an eye on that one.
Right. So he said after that, he and Amy had stopped at a pizza place where she bought him 2 slices of pizza. But they met up with the men again at the Pavilion. This was a popular dance club that had been renovated from an old bank building down there. Rubright didn't dance either. So again, he drank beer.
He's a real party animal, isn't he?
Yeah.
Doesn't play pool, doesn't dance.
Doesn't dance,
no. But he can drink beer.
He drank some beer, and Amy left him to find someone to dance with because she loved to dance. So Rubright just kind of stood against a wall and watched Amy as she talked and danced with these 2 men from the pool hall. So Rubright told detectives that after last call between 12:45 and 1 a.m., he had gone to the men's room. There was a long line, and by the time he came out of the bathroom, Amy and the 2 guys were gone. He said he looked around for Amy inside and outside of the Pavilion.
Yeah, so apparently she just left.
Yeah, that's what he said.
And he didn't say anything to her like, I got to go to the bathroom, I'll be a few minutes, wait for me. Anything like that.
I mean, the way I visualize it is she was kind of having a good time meeting these other guys and getting the attention, and he was kind of jealous, you know. He seems like he was a very reserved guy, at least. You know, drinking his beer, not really getting into any activities that night.
Right.
So the way I saw it is she's busy with these other guys, and he decides to go to the bathroom thinking he'll be right back. Took longer than he thought, then he can't find her. At least that's his story.
That's his story. It sounds to me a little suspicious, and I guess it did to the police because they really looked hard at him.
Well, they have to.
So Rubright said he had stood outside the pavilion's doors until around 1:20 in the morning, but he couldn't find Amy. Now, about that time, the staff of the facility began asking people to move away. And this was a policy that the old port bars had established in order to prevent rowdy crowds. The place might be closed, but you don't need to be all congregating outside.
No, you have to move along.
Let's be on our way.
That's why they had policemen out there moving people along.
And so everyone had left the club. Rubright assumed that Amy had left with the 2 men. He walked to the parking garage to his car. And in the car was Amy's cell phone, coat, purse, and backpack. Because remember, they had come straight up from Boston after dinner. No stops. So all that she had with her were her driver's license and some cash. Rubright said that he may have driven around the block looking for Amy, but he didn't see her. And he gave up and figured she'd find her own way home, and he drove back to her house in South Berwick.
Yes, I don't know how to really take that, because is it really cool to leave the city with her purse, coat, and everything without being a little more thorough in looking for her?
I know.
I mean, I can't really see what all he could have done. He doesn't know where these guys were or where she went. Plus, she was already kind of backing off from him, it seems like. So he probably just figured, I'm out of here.
Sure, I can see that.
If the story was true.
Yeah.
So according to Rubright, he followed the compass in his car and just started driving south. He stopped somewhere in South Portland to put gas in the car. And after he bought the gas, he told the police, he continued south, he got on the turnpike, and he drove to the Wells exit, which would lead to South Berwick. From there, he followed the route he knew to Amy's house, and he told the detectives that at the turnpike tolls he had no cash. So he told the toll person that he only had 15 cents and asked her if he could please use the highway anyway, because it's the only route he knew and he was kind of lost. So I guess this toll taker took some sympathy on him and let him through.
Yeah, and he was able to give detectives a handful of receipts from his wallet to show them his activities from Saturday night to Sunday morning. One of these slips was a credit card receipt for the gas. Rubright said when he got to Amy's house, she wasn't there. Then he checked her home phone and cell phone for messages, but there weren't any. I said he was uncomfortable sleeping in her house, since she wasn't there, so he slept in his car outside. Then in the morning, he used the key she had given him to re-enter her house and take a shower. Still no sign of her on that Sunday, so he left a note on her door asking what had happened, thanked her for the visit, and then he left her purse and backpack inside her house, left her coat on the hood of her car, and that was parked where she had left it Saturday. And he left her house key on the tire of her car, and then he left.
So he was at least annoyed with Amy that night. He had to be, if that's how it went. He had been interested in her, and she'd apparently gone home with another man. But would she really leave him with her purse, her backpack, her coat, and her cell phone? That doesn't seem likely.
No, it doesn't.
So Eric Rubright did look like a good suspect.
Well, yeah, I mean, if I'm listening to this story, it's kind of weird, you know?
Sure.
So I'd be suspicious.
Well, his story of Amy disappearing while he was in the bathroom seemed pretty odd. Police were suspicious of his claim that he'd run out of money and had to talk his way onto the turnpike also. They also wondered why he'd felt uncomfortable in Amy's apartment and why he had slept in his car that night. It seemed possible to detectives that Rubright had slept in the car, because maybe he couldn't face being in Amy's apartment after he'd hurt her or killed her. And maybe she didn't have her cell phone or purse because if she had been killed, obviously she wouldn't need them. So they're immediately suspicious that he has done something to her.
Yeah, they would be.
And with good reason.
I think so. So Rubright agreed to have his rental car searched, and he also consented to a polygraph. Then detectives got a call from Amy's stepfather. His name is Don Jenkins. Jenkins said he had been contacted by a man in the Old Port who had seen the missing poster with Amy's picture. And the man said he was calling because he had been with Amy early on Sunday morning. So Jenkins said he told the caller and some other men he had been with to go to the Portland police station and talk to the detectives.
Right, so a Portland police sergeant was in his cruiser in the Old Port when he was waved down by 3 young men who told him they were going to the PD to talk about Amy. The 3 men were Jeffrey Russ Gorman, Kush Sharma, and Jason Cook, and these guys shared an apartment on Brighton Avenue in Portland. So they got into the police cruiser and were driven to the police department for questioning. The men said they had been at a bar called Diggers, and the bartender had shown them the flyer with Amy's picture on it. Jason Cook immediately recognized her as the woman that Russ Gorman had been with early on Sunday morning. So at Cook's insistence, Russ Gorman had called the number on the flyer, and he spoke with Amy's stepdad. who had told him to contact the Portland police. So it was of course important to interview these 3 guys right away. It was also crucial to separate them, so they wouldn't be able to come up with a story. So it's not easy to maintain a lie if it didn't happen, because the details of events aren't concrete in your mind. So for this reason, liars can have a difficult time keeping their story straight. And he didn't want these 3 guys to be able to organize what they were going to say if they'd done something. So they interviewed each of the guys separately, knowing that if any lies were told, they'd probably be exposed by comparing them to the other guys' interviews, because there would be inconsistencies. So here is Russ Gorman's story. He met Amy at Foreplay, which is a rowdy bar and pool hall, at around 10:30 p.m. He and his roommate, Kush Sharma, played pool with her and an older guy for 15 or 20 minutes. He said he knew that Amy was with a man from Florida who was watching them but wasn't playing any pool. Gorman and Sharma left Foreplay to go to a bar called the Iguana. Then, at around 11:45, they went to a dance club, and that was the Pavilion. About an hour later, according to Gorman, Amy came up to him, pinched him on his side, and told him she couldn't find her friend from Florida. Gorman said that he then invited her to come back to his house, where he told her there was going to be a birthday party for the other roommate, Jason Cook. So Amy looked around some more, trying to find Rubright, who had her keys, and she couldn't find him, so she agreed to go to the party with Gorman. So during his interview, Gorman was shown a picture of Amy, which he identified as the woman he was with early Sunday morning. He said that he and Sharma and Amy went in his car from the Old Port to the apartment on Brighton Avenue, where Gorman was staying. And Gorman had told Amy that some friends were getting together for a birthday party. But when they arrived around 1:15 a.m., there was no party. In fact, it was just the 3 of them there, and I'm sure that made her uncomfortable.
Well, yeah.
I mean, she was probably immediately thinking this was a mistake.
She just met these guys.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
And they seemed nice, but wow, let's have a party.
Well, I think that he just made that up to get her back to his apartment.
Well, sure. Gorman said that he and Sharma had some alcoholic drinks, and he couldn't remember if Amy was drinking or not. Then after a while, Sharma and Amy went outside to walk Jason Cook's dog, and Sharma also wanted to smoke a cigarette. So nobody showed up for this so-called after-hours party, and Amy asked to be driven back to the Pavilion. She said she'd go back there, look for her friend from Florida, and if she didn't find him, she'd just go stay with her mother in South Portland.
And I bet at this point she just wanted to get away from this guy.
Mm-hmm.
So,
she was getting some vibrations.
Yeah, I think you do. I think you get a feeling.
Things weren't looking right.
So Jason Cook arrived at the house as Gorman was leaving to drive Amy back to the Old Port, and this was around 1:45 a.m. Gorman told the police he dropped Amy off in front of the Pavilion just before 2 a.m., and it looked to him like she was walking toward the entrance when he last saw her. He said that he noticed other people standing around outside, but he didn't see her talk to anybody. So after dropping off Amy, he said that he went straight home. And he estimated that this whole thing, dropping her off and coming back, took less than 10 minutes. And he claimed to have stayed home for the rest of the night. So all told, he said that he may have been gone from the apartment for 20 minutes, no more. And normally experience would have told the detectives to focus on Russ Gorman as a potential suspect, because he had been the last person seen with Amy. But they still had Eric Rubright to consider, because he looks pretty good for it as well. Rubright had been with Amy that evening, and he was in possession of her cell phone and purse that night. So his story needed to be checked out, as well as Gorman's.
Well, definitely. And detectives were, at first at least anyway, more focused on Rubright. So he had this very elaborate story, which was filled with small details that could have been used to cover up his guilt. And one thing was, if Gorman had dropped her off at the Pavilion, as he said, an angry Rubright could have come back there and picked her up. But
Sure.
He didn't, as we know, he didn't.
Well, he said he didn't.
So, and Gorman's roommates and friends needed to be thoroughly interviewed also. We've got to corroborate all these stories. They also needed to talk to the staff and any other witnesses they could find, both at Foreplay and the Pavilion. Because somebody might have seen Amy with Gorman, or Rubright, or someone else even. It was important to find witnesses who may have been outside when Gorman dropped Amy off.
Right. Well, another thing detectives did right away is they checked the criminal histories of Gorman and Rubright. So this way they could develop profiles of each of these guys. If they believed that Amy had been a victim of foul play, then they also needed to develop a profile of her. So this detailed study of a victim is called victimology. They're trying to find out if there's anything in her character or in her history that would suggest that she wasn't as responsible as her family and friends were insisting that she was. People did take off without telling people sometimes, so they had to consider that. And especially in the early days of an investigation, they have to be open to all possibilities, right? You don't want to get tunnel vision.
No, I mean, it can be difficult if you're really focused on one guy that you're pretty convinced might be the perpetrator. It's tough to be open to other possibilities.
Yeah, I could see that.
But these police officers seem to be ready to listen to anything.
Yes, I mean, they also needed to find out if there was anyone else in Amy's life who might have been motivated to hurt her, like a jealous ex-boyfriend, something like that.
Absolutely.
Today's show is sponsored by Audible. Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment, including podcasts, guided wellness programs, theatrical performances, comedy, and, of course, audiobooks.
And they are coming in very handy right now.
Yes, definitely something to do, so you don't just watch TV constantly. You need to keep busy while you're at home. We have been Audible members for years now, and I really can't imagine living without it, especially now that we're kind of quarantined here. And Audible gives me the gift of found time, because I can listen while I'm doing other stuff, cleaning, making dinner, exercising. So when you join Audible, you get 1 credit for any title, and 2 credits for Audible originals from a monthly selection that they give you. And what a lot of people don't know is that you also get access to daily news from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post. So that's pretty amazing. We got to give up our subscription, our online subscription to the New York Times, because we can just go there. And with Audible, you can also download titles so you can listen anywhere, anytime, even if you don't have Wi-Fi available. And even when you switch devices, Audible keeps your place for you. The Audible title I'm recommending to our listeners today is Starvation Heights by Greg Olson. And this book is about a crime we're covering soon, and it happened over 100 years ago. Back in the early 1900s, there was this so-called osteopathic doctor with very little formal training and no medical degree, who was licensed in Washington State as what she called a fasting specialist, and this woman's name was Linda Hazard. She had this theory that food causes all disease, and her cure was to starve her patients. Some of her patients survived and said she was great, but many of them died. They absolutely trusted her, almost like they were brainwashed, and seemed willing to starve themselves, many to the point of death. Hazard also scammed these patients for money and property. So the details of how sick and frail her patients became is so shocking. It's just fascinating and upsetting. And a lot of human psychology in this story. Really a good one. The Audible app is free, and it can be installed on all smartphones and devices. To try Audible, just visit audible.com/brewery, or you can text brewery to 500-500. That's Audible, audible.com/brewery, BREWERY. Give it a try.
You won't be disappointed, that's for sure.
Now, there's so much to get from it.
So by the Tuesday morning after Amy's disappearance, police had interviewed Rubright, Sharma, Cook, and Gorman. So we're now looking at about 2 days of being missing. Detectives began to do a detailed record check on everyone that they had interviewed. And the two at the center of the investigation were Rubright and Gorman. A missing persons report was put together for Amy, and her information was entered into the National Crime Information Center, NCIC, system as an attempt to locate, which is ATL, if we start throwing acronyms around.
Yeah. You could do that, but you do have to spell them out for people. Because I didn't know what either of those were. Exactly.
So the chief of police in Portland was Michael Chitwood. He and Amy's parents, or family members, held a news conference, and in this conference she was officially declared missing. Amy was described as a responsible young woman, and she was not the type who would disappear on her own. Family members asked the public for any information they might have and for help in locating Amy. Detectives spent the next day gathering information on their most likely suspects, Rubright and Gorman. And then they began checking their stories about what they said they had been doing on Saturday night and early Sunday morning.
Yeah, so they had detectives answering phones, and they had others out interviewing witnesses. Rubright was scheduled to leave that day on a 4 p.m. flight back to Florida, but he agreed to the police's request that he return for a second interview and take a polygraph, so he delayed his flight home until Wednesday. Detectives were happy that he was cooperating, but they still felt like some things about Rubright were concerning. Amy St Laurent's neighbor, Ruth McElhaney, told the South Berwick Police Department about Rubright's angry behavior in the driveway that she shared with Amy. So on Friday night, Amy had told Ruth that Rubright was angry because he'd hoped to have sex with Amy and she had turned him down. And other friends of Amy's confirmed that in the days leading up to Rubright's arrival, she was becoming nervous about his visit, and she said she was worried about being able to deal with him, because she could tell he wanted more. Rubright's history revealed some minor drug offenses, and detectives also learned that Rubright, who was a big guy, a former semi-professional rugby player, had been the subject of a restraining order after being involved in a domestic altercation with a former girlfriend. So detectives believed that a guy who had flown over 1,000 miles to see a girl who he hoped to have sex with might really react badly if she rejected his advances once he was there.
Oh, sure. When they're finding this information out about him, I bet he looked better and better to them.
Absolutely.
As a suspect.
Mm-hmm. I mean, his involvement in her disappearance made a lot of sense, but there was no evidence. If Russ Gorman was telling the truth and he had dropped off Amy at the pavilion Sunday morning, it's pretty easy to imagine Rubright picking her up and being angry and jealous when he did it.
Then when they did the polygraph on Rubright, he did not do well at all. Even before he was connected to the machine, his body language was pretty strange. He looked down and he leaned away from the examiner, which suggested he was trying to hide something. And just bringing up Amy's name got a strong response from him. So he was flagged as deceptive when he was asked why Rubright was able to enter Amy's apartment to take a shower, but he'd been uncomfortable sleeping there. I was wondering the same thing, actually.
Well, yeah, but at the same time I could see it. If you're visiting someone you don't know very well, and they're not home, you would feel a little weird staying there.
Oh, certainly. But not so weird that he didn't go back the next morning and take a shower in it.
Right, but where else was he going to take a shower? That's where he was staying.
Okay.
I'm just saying it's not that weird.
Little weird.
Little weird.
So the polygraph session went on for hours, and even after being confronted about his evasiveness, Rubright continued to be untruthful. And he again showed a strong response when asked if he had anything to do with Amy's disappearance. So it was looking to the investigators that he could be the guy responsible. They liked him.
Yeah, some did, and some investigators on the case disagreed. They believed that Russ Gorman was the most likely suspect. Although the polygraph and Rubright's strange behavior did make him look like he could be involved, he was very cooperative and forthcoming with information, and he described how he was unable to find Amy. He talked about when he left the pavilion, how he was looking for her, and how he had to use a compass to travel south to the turnpike. So all these details didn't seem made up to the experienced detectives. It seemed kind of genuine to them. So it was convincing, and he seemed willing enough to speak with them. He was a former college athlete who was unemployed after having a concussion from a car accident. And he seemed really down to earth and kind of uncomplicated. Just a guy who had a crush on Amy and was disappointed.
Yeah, but suspicions against Rubright couldn't that easily be put aside.
Oh, no.
Another thing that got the investigators a little interested was that he refused to give hair or DNA samples.
Yeah, so they really have two strong suspects, I think.
Well, they do, and we're going to hear more about the second one.
Sure.
So even while they were talking to Rubright, the detectives were also focused on Russ Gorman. And according to Gorman, and the timeline that had been developed for Saturday night and Sunday morning, he was the last person known to have seen Amy St Laurent alive.
Well, sure, and it was his roommate who told him that he saw the poster and they should go to the police and called the stepfather, right?
Right, it wasn't Gorman.
No, so he wasn't as forthcoming.
No, I think he would have just let it slide unless his roommate hadn't mentioned it.
Yeah, Gorman was a younger guy who thought he was really something. He was 21. He was kind of short, 5'8" and about 160 pounds, but saw himself as a true ladies' man. His look, though, was similar to that of a teenager in the 90s. He had the heavily gelled, bleached hair tips, and he had some tattoos and a pierced ear. He was kind of a regular in the old port bar scene, well known to bartenders and bouncers. That was the main thing he did, was going to bars and picking up girls.
And having sex with the girls.
Yes. And it turns out maybe when they didn't even want it.
That's a strong possibility.
Yes. In a background check, detectives learned that Gorman had been raised in Troy, Alabama, and Delray Beach, Florida. He lived in Portland for just about 18 months. He had moved up from Florida after his mom, Tammy Westbrook, and her boyfriend, Rick DeVoe, moved to nearby Scarborough, Maine. The state criminal records search showed Gorman was on probation in Maine for theft. And he hadn't mentioned that in his interviews with police, which was a big no-no. If you're on probation, you are actually required by law to tell the police. And you're supposed to let your probation officer know about any contacts you have with police. And he knew that, but he didn't do it.
Nope. So detectives contacted the Troy, Alabama, and Delray Beach, Florida police departments to check Gorman's record in those states. On the same Tuesday when Eric Rubright was interviewed, Gorman was interviewed for a second time. And Gorman said that he worked as a car detailer and he was an on-call bouncer at the Iguana Bar. A 5'8", 160-pound bouncer.
I know, kind of weird. But he thought he was a tough guy.
Maybe he was more threatening.
He didn't look threatening, but of course he had a temper, and he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you look at him, this little small guy with bleach blonde hair.
Yeah.
He wouldn't make me filled with fear.
No.
So Gorman had been sleeping in his friend's Brighton Avenue apartment for about 2 weeks. So he was just kind of crashing there and sleeping on the couch. The other residents of the apartment were Kush Sharma, Jason Cook, we've talked about them before. There was also a guy named Dave Grazier, and Grazier's fiancée, Dawn Shimrick, living at the apartment. Now, prior to staying there, Gorman had stayed with another bouncer from the Iguana. And Gorman repeated the same story he had told the other time. He and Amy left the pavilion with Sharma. They went to the apartment on Brighton Avenue. When there was no party, Amy wanted to go back to the pavilion to look for Eric Rubright. And Gorman said that he left the apartment about 1:45 in the morning, and he drove Amy back to the pavilion in his red Pontiac Grand Am.
Yeah, on their way out of the apartment building, Gorman and Amy ran into Jason Cook, who was just returning from his job. And once at the pavilion, Gorman said he slowed down in the street to let Amy out of his car. He said he didn't even put the car in park. He described the scene outside the pavilion as crowded with young people leaving the club, and he told detectives that he had some reservations about leaving her there alone, but she had insisted. So after leaving Amy, Gorman said he went straight back to the apartment, and he said that the trip took about 6 minutes each way, But he couldn't or wouldn't name the streets he had taken. He seemed afraid to commit to a route. And Gorman claimed that Amy did not appear to be drunk at all. When he got back to the apartment, he said Jason Cook was on his computer sending an email message to his aunt in Florida. And Gorman said that he also made a phone call, but he said he couldn't remember who he had called, which is strange to me. Even if you're drunk, you would remember that.
I would think, right?
Yeah, but instead he gave 3 possibilities. His ex-girlfriend, Jamie Bellergeron, and a friend named Matt Despins, and also another friend named Kermit Bolio.
So Gorman said that he had been lying on the couch watching TV when Dawn and Dave came home. The detectives told Gorman that they would like him to take a polygraph test also, in order to eliminate him as a suspect. But Gorman refused. He said he wanted to talk to a lawyer first. So police then asked Gorman for permission to search his car. But he said that it was an inconvenient time for him and did not allow the search.
Yeah, so of course these responses raised some red flags in the minds of the detectives.
He's going to move up on the suspect list here, isn't he?
Yeah, they also didn't like how he seemed so familiar with the criminal justice system. Made him seem kind of like a hardened criminal. He didn't seem at all intimidated by police like most people would be when you're being interviewed about a missing person. And he had begun his second interview by bringing up this guy in a yellow suit who was acting weird in the old port. And he told police they should definitely investigate that guy. He was very comfortable asserting his rights with them, too. And once they got his records from Florida and Alabama, they understood that he really did have a long history of crime. He was familiar with talking to police.
He certainly was. And the more they learned about Gorman, the more police believed that he was responsible for Amy St Laurent's disappearance. The profile they put together for Amy was that of a thoughtful, responsible young woman. She was quite innocent and just not at all familiar with the dark side of some people. Gorman was manipulative enough to have charmed her, gotten her to trust him, and then turned violent if she rejected him. His criminal record and statements from people who knew him painted a portrait of a man who lacked empathy, disrespected women, was willing to exploit people to suit his needs, and had shown a violent side to his personality. So he's looking better. And Rubright's story checked out pretty well, so they pretty much eliminated him.
Yeah, the focus turned to Gorman. And Gorman, he had been born in Alabama. His parents had divorced when he was 6. So his father had left his life and didn't stay involved, and his mother had issues, so she wasn't reliable. So he ended up in the custody of his grandparents a lot of the time. He did poorly in school and built a long juvenile record, and his crimes included auto theft, robbery, breaking and entering, assaulting a teacher, and making sexual advances on a 13-year-old girl. He also had a history of abusing drugs and alcohol from his early teens, and was well known for having an explosive temper. In 1994, when Gorman was 15, he broke into a neighbor's house and stole guns, and then he attacked his mother. So at that point, she didn't know what to do with him, and he was taken into the custody of the state. And he was put on probation until the age of 18. When he was 18, he moved back in with his mother, but he ended up punching her in the face during a fight. He also had a girlfriend in Florida who became pregnant with his child, and during her pregnancy, he hit and punched her several times. There were police complaints. So he's starting to look more and more like a good suspect.
He certainly is. Now, at the time he met Amy, Gorman was on probation for stealing stereo equipment from a car dealership where he had been employed. But despite his horrible history and his unstable personality, he did have admirers in the club scene, as after all, he was known for his skill at picking up and having sex with women, which is a good vocation to have, right?
Well, it's very immature, the way he acted, and very predatory.
Absolutely. And Gorman had bragged that he had slept with over 90 women.
Yeah, so brag, to me, that's nothing to brag about. It's just gross. Sorry, it's gross.
Well, it is.
I mean, he got so many women that some of his friends believed he had been using drugs to sedate them and have his way with them. He was a dealer of the club drug ecstasy, and he was known for exchanging the drug for sex with women. And the really terrifying part is that many of the women he bragged about seducing had no memory of the sex with Gorman. So Amy's uncharacteristic choice to leave the club with him could have been connected to him possibly drugging her, giving her a date rape drug. I wouldn't be surprised. Because it doesn't seem like her to go to the apartment with them. I'm not sure about that.
Well,
she seems smarter than that.
She does. But on the other hand, she doesn't have anything except for a driver's license and a little bit of money.
Yeah, so if he could convince her he was a good guy.
Yeah.
I mean, we all make some bad choices here and there, and she could have just not judged him correctly. It's easy to do. She was kind of innocent in that way. So another weird thing was after Amy disappeared, Gorman cleaned his car.
The very next day after her disappearance.
Yeah. He'd worked part-time at this detailing shop, and he was able to use their equipment and did a really deep cleaning. So this, of course, was seen as suspicious by investigators. But they still wanted to search the car. You know, using forensics techniques, it was still possible that they would find some evidence after he cleaned it. So 1 week after Amy's disappearance, a judge signed a search warrant for Gorman's car. It was found parked in the old port, and they towed it to police headquarters. By this time, it was unlikely that Amy would be found alive. It would really take a long time for forensics testing to be done from the car search, so detectives needed to concentrate on other ways to make a case and, hopefully, if not find Amy alive, at least find her remains.
Yeah, and Gorman's behavior after Amy's disappearance continued to raise red flags. The biggest one was him cleaning his car, which people who knew him said he never did that.
Right, he always had a really dirty car.
It was a mess.
It was very unusual.
Now, he also had tried to look innocent by showing concern for Amy's family. He had also called police to report a sighting of Amy. Now, after his car was taken for the search, Gorman called the police department in a rage and insisted it be returned. Now, he even demanded compensation for some fabric samples that had been removed from the car.
Yeah, so he's not only not intimidated by police, but he's kind of stupid, the way he acts with them.
Well, he's not helping himself, that's for sure.
No. Well, and then he changed his appearance, so that made investigators wonder if he was planning to flee. He shaved his head, making it impossible to get hair samples, and he also got more tattoos and piercings. So police had begun following and surveilling Gorman. They felt like he would eventually be unable to resist returning to the site where he had hidden Amy's body. So it was difficult for detectives to watch as Gorman was seducing teenage girls and young women. And they knew that his charming manner really hid a violent sexual predator. So it's really a tough thing to sit by and see that happening and not be allowed to warn them.
No kidding. So in interviewing Gorman's friends, the consensus was that Gorman was a pretty good guy. He was seen as a lot of fun, and hanging around with him helped them pick up women also. Although they didn't say as much, they were probably fond of him for the drugs he provided, in addition. There were a few people who admitted to being afraid of him. They said he had a bad temper, and he was always ready to fight, especially if he'd been drinking.
Yeah, in Kush Sharma's first interview, he insisted that Gorman was gone for only about 20 minutes when he left to take Amy back to the pavilion. And he said that after returning, Gorman had stayed in the apartment for the remainder of the night. But then in a later interview, he wasn't so sure. And he said that when he and Amy were out walking the dog, she asked him if Gorman was okay, as if she suspected something was off with him. So she was feeling very hesitant about the whole thing.
She certainly was. Jason Cook, another one of the roommates, initially said that Gorman had returned to the apartment after 20 minutes. He had said that he saw Gorman return because he was sending an email from the living room computer. But after the email couldn't be verified, Cook simply said, well, he knew he had seen Gorman come back, less certain about the time now.
Yeah, it would turn out that another roommate says that it was more like 4 a.m. and that he was fully dressed and in the bathroom washing. So there's a really suspicious story.
Not looking good for Gorman.
And after several interviews with Cook, he revealed that Gorman had asked him while at the Iguana bar if he could bring Amy to the apartment to have sex with her, and Cook had said no. So Gorman's intention to have sex with Amy had been confirmed. Also, there was a waitress at the Iguana who reported that Gorman had asked her if he should take Amy home and have sex with her. Gorman also called a friend that night trying to get a room at a cheap motel, saying he wanted to get a quick blowjob from Amy.
Such a romanticist.
Ugh, a lot coming out here. Not a good picture of this guy.
Not at all. Ryan Campbell, who was a reserve police officer in Old Orchard Beach, which is a nearby community, reported that his Glock 9mm gun had gone missing. He said he had last seen it between October 7th and October 10th, after spending an evening with Gorman, and he believed that Gorman might have taken it. Now, when the report on the missing weapon was pulled up, Campbell had written that his weapon was missing from his lockbox and that Gorman had been the last person to see it. However, when asked why Gorman was the last person to see the weapon, he really couldn't give an answer.
Yeah, he was covering things up, and after several follow-up interviews, and after putting pressure on him, he finally admitted that he'd gone out for an evening with Gorman, and they'd picked up some girls and brought one girl back to Campbell's room. Campbell said that he had worn the gun all that evening, but he eventually put it under the seat of his car. After they pulled up to the house, Gorman handed Campbell his gun, and Campbell took it inside, but he said he fell asleep without locking the gun up, and when he woke up the next morning, the gun was gone. So, he was very irresponsible with his gun, but it does look like it was Gorman who got a hold of it.
It does. Now, the search for Amy was an extensive one. Police and volunteers searched all the hiking trails on Mount Agamenicus, which is an area near Amy's home in South Berwick. They searched ponds, they searched sand pits, they searched junkyards, woods, fields. Maine State Police troopers used tracking dogs and aerial surveys with the state police pilot.
Yeah, so by mid-November, Amy's body still hadn't been found, but she's assumed to be dead. The police put a tracking device on Gorman's car, and the plan was to get Gorman to believe a body had been found, and hopefully that would cause him to drive to the site to check. So they recruited 2 young female state police officers, and these women wore plain clothes and went to the pizza shop where Gorman was currently working. But after all this planning, Gorman didn't show up for work at the pizza shop, and they found out he'd already quit that job. He wasn't known for keeping a job very long.
No, he'd work someplace just long enough to make some money so he could buy drugs.
Yeah, and he would steal from his employers a lot, too.
Yeah, well, that's not a good thing.
No.
Now, there was a plan B to all this, and this was to have a friend of Gorman's call him and tell him that a body had been found. And they figured after he heard that news, he would take him to the body.
Right.
But he didn't go anywhere, and the operation was canceled.
Yeah, so in an attempt to increase pressure on him, the police went public with the detail that Gorman had never dropped off Amy in front of the pavilion. They knew that. Gorman's story had been that there were people hanging around in front of the club when he dropped off Amy at 1:45 a.m., but police knew that there were very few people out in the Old Port at that hour, and everyone who had been at or near the pavilion that night had been interviewed, and they confirmed that Gorman's car and Amy were not seen at that time or at that location at all. It was actually kind of a deserted area by that time.
Yeah, remember the goal of the establishments is to get people to disperse once the last call occurs.
Yeah, it was a city policy.
Yeah, so we're not going to have people mingling around and hanging around.
No.
So now his story is a little suspect, right?
More than a little. I mean, they caught him in a lie there.
They did. Things were becoming more uncomfortable for Gorman as more and more people knew of the police's suspicions. Gorman and a friend, Sean Littlefield, left Maine just before Thanksgiving, and they drove to Troy, Alabama in Littlefield's car. So he's getting out of Maine for a while, trying to let the heat cool off.
I suppose. At this time, the Maine Warden Service contacted the Maine State Police and offered to help in the search for Amy. And after some lengthy discussions, they landed on 8 general areas where they felt Gorman may have hidden her body. These were the area near Gorman's mother's house, the Old Port area near the pavilion, some areas near Amy's mother's house, and of course the area around Amy's South Berwick home. There were also some sites that Gorman had spoken to friends about. And around this time, in an interview with Gorman's mother's boyfriend, Richard DeVoe, he told detectives that around the time of Amy's disappearance, Gorman asked him if he could borrow a shovel so that he could help a friend install a fence. So DeVoe had directed Gorman to a shovel behind the house and also to a post hole digger in his shed. But then later he noticed that the post hole digger had not been touched, but he wasn't sure about the shovel where that was.
Yeah, it had gone missing.
Yeah, so detectives tried, but they couldn't find anyone who had asked Gorman to help on a fence. And also it seemed unlikely that Gorman had used the shovel to put in a fence because he wasn't the type of guy to help out and do any kind of labor. So of course they're thinking that he had used the shovel to bury Amy.
That's a good presumption.
I think so. Another compelling discovery was a report that at 3:14 a.m. that Sunday morning, the last day Amy had been seen alive, Gorman was stopped for a high beam violation in the nearby city of Westbrook, and he was alone in his car. So this was at a time when Gorman and his roommates had claimed that he had been at home. And this gave police official documentation that Gorman had not been at home like he said, so it confirmed that he had lied.
Things are tightening up for Mr. Gorman here. So there's going to be a big search effort on Saturday, December 8th. And this is going to involve all the people from the police departments and the warden, the Maine wardens. They had some really good ideas about where to focus their searches, as you mentioned. So on Saturday, December 8th, one search team went through the area behind Gorman's mother's house. There's an old access road leading into some woods. They went through that area, and then on their way back, still walking slowly, paying attention, they entered an area that had pine trees with low branches. And a volunteer noticed that there was a patch of soil that looked slightly depressed from the surrounding ground. It actually appeared to have been disturbed, with some pine needles scattered over it. It looked like somebody had been digging there recently. So closer examination of the area showed shovel marks and a disturbed area about 6 feet in diameter. And this area was topped with sod, which looked like it had been cut into patches to fill in the hole. And then pine needles had been put over the dirt. All this was certainly seen as an effort to hide the disturbed area.
Oh, sure. I think they were pretty sure they'd found something. I mean, remember, this is behind Gorman's mother's house. It's not a remote area particularly.
No. And it is an area that would be familiar to Gorman.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not an area that would just be happened upon by chance. If you're looking at somebody else other than Gorman taking Amy.
Sure.
This isn't an area that anyone would find.
Probably not, no.
So they dug a small test hole around 4 to 6 inches in diameter, and they went 2 feet down. They hit some solid material. They found a small amount of gray sweatshirt. And guess what? Amy had been wearing a sweatshirt when she disappeared. So turned out to be Amy's grave.
Yeah, and this was less than half a mile behind Gorman's mother's house in Scarborough, a suburb of Portland. So after 7 weeks in the ground, Amy's body was not identifiable just by looking at her. After cleaning her body in the autopsy room, investigators were able to identify her sweatshirt, her shirt, and her bra. Her bra had been pushed up over her breasts, her jeans, one sock, and her shoes were missing, and her underwear was around her ankles. So it definitely seemed like a violent sexual attack and murder.
Formal identification was going to be done by DNA results, or by dental records, or both, but there was enough information on her body to know that it was Amy. There were surgical scars, there is a small dolphin tattoo around one ankle, and she was wearing jewelry that was recognized.
Yeah, in their autopsy, the medical examiner concluded that Amy had been severely beaten on her head before she died. Her skull showed evidence of several blows. She also had a chipped tooth and a broken facial bone, so this was brutal. Then also behind her left ear there was a large hole in her skull, a gunshot wound, and a hole on the right side of her skull was an exit wound for the gunshot. So Amy had been beaten, sexually assaulted, and shot in the head. But since no bullet or blood was found around this burial site, detectives really believed that the murder had happened somewhere else, and then he had brought Amy out there and dumped her.
Now, detectives also received a call from a woman in Florida. She was a friend and former neighbor of Gorman's mother. That's Tammy Westbrook.
Yeah, Tammy's teenage daughter was a close friend of this former neighbor's daughter named Mary. And Mary told a detective that she had received a call from Tammy recently, and in that call, Tammy was very distressed, and she described a phone call from her son, Russ Gorman. In the call, he had told his mother that he already knew that Amy was dead, and then he blamed Amy's murder on two of his roommates. Ever since Gorman had moved back to Alabama, Tammy had been calling her son often and giving him updates on the news reports. And after hearing that Amy's body had been found, Gorman was of course getting nervous. He went to a local college and checked main newspaper stories on the internet. And on December 9th, he called his mother. She told him his story about the roommates killing Amy just didn't ring true, and he ended up confessing to the murder to his mother. He described how he had walked Amy by the lake, he became enraged by something that she said to him, and he shot her in the head. He also told his mother that as he beat and shot Amy, he saw his mother's face, so he said she should be happy that it wasn't her he killed. And soon after that, Gorman called her and asked for money. And guess what? She sent him money.
Well, sure. He's a good boy.
But fortunately, Tammy had called this Mary, and Mary called the police with all this information, because Tammy hadn't reported this confession to the police.
Now, Tammy also called a priest she knew from Florida and told him about the confession. And there was a former girlfriend of Gorman's who came forward and told police that Gorman had told her that his roommates had killed Amy. The roommates had asked Gorman where a good place to hide a body would be, and he had suggested the woods behind his mother's house. When she had asked Gorman if it bothered him that Amy's family was suffering, not knowing where Amy was, he said, "Well, I felt bad at first, but then I stopped caring."
What a piece of shit this guy is, huh?
He's a nice, lovely boy.
Awful.
Now, the Portland police and the Maine State Police carried out a warrant to search Gorman's mother's house in Scarborough. They were hoping to find the shovel Gorman had borrowed, a gun, some ammunition, any of Amy's missing clothing, bloodstained clothing, anything with Gorman's DNA. When they arrived at the house, Gorman's little sister was at home, and Gorman called her, and after talking to him for a moment, she handed the phone to a police officer saying, "My brother wants to talk to you." So Gorman identified himself, and he questioned about their right to do the search. He ordered them to leave. The officer explained that they had a warrant, and they would leave when they finished the search. So the officer then asked if Gorman would like to talk about things, and this just really enraged Gorman. He said, "Fuck you, come get me, bitch," and he hung up.
Yeah, he's just a sweetie pie.
Well, he's a really cooperative guy trying to find the person who harmed Amy.
Right, so while they're searching his mother Tammy's house, she returned to her house, and two detectives sat down and talked with her in her kitchen. They felt from her demeanor that she knew more than she was letting on, but she also seemed pretty determined to protect her son. And she ended the interview, but she didn't say that she wouldn't be available for another one, so they kept that road open. The neighbor she had called, Mary Young, called the police again a couple of weeks later, and she reported that Russ Gorman had called his ex-girlfriend, who was the mother of his daughter, that one who he had abused, who lived right across the street from Mary Young. According to the ex-girlfriend, Gorman told her that the police wouldn't find any DNA because he said Amy was not raped, He also said that he had washed her body off after he killed her. So he's not keeping this secret, and fortunately some people are coming forward.
Yeah, it's good that they did.
Absolutely. I mean, at the same time, though, he was really becoming unhinged. He told several people that he had 2 guns because he would never be taken alive by the police, and he would never go back to Maine. Then he had pointed a gun at a man who just happened to be a football coach at Troy State University, and this guy was just walking out of a sub shop when Gorman leaned out of his car window and told the man not to stare at him. The man asked Gorman what he was going to do about it, and in response, Gorman had gotten out of his car and pointed a handgun at the guy. So, of course, after Gorman drove away, this guy had called the police to report this.
Good.
And following this incident, the Troy police searched for Gorman, and Maine detectives asked them to arrest him and hold him because they wanted to extradite him to Maine. He was in violation of his probation for leaving the state and, of course, for having a gun.
Yeah, so the Troy police showed up at Gorman's house to arrest him. And when they arrived there, he held his 2 guns to his head and threatened to shoot himself. So the police evacuated the other people in the house, one of which was a 3-year-old little kid. And after a 5.5-hour standoff, negotiators were able to get him to surrender his guns, and they took him into custody.
So that's super serious and scary.
Isn't it?
Not just anybody would do that. How terrifying.
So, Maine detectives went to Alabama to interview Gorman and witnesses who lived in the state. They hoped to surprise him and throw him off balance. And they also wanted to see his reactions to some new information they had. For one thing, they wanted to see what Gorman would say about the night Amy went missing, now that his Westbrook traffic stop had come to light. Gorman wouldn't speak with him, and he kept to his original story that he had dropped off Amy at the pavilion, and then he went home.
Yeah, so this was actually good news for detectives because this interview was taped, and they had him on tape telling an outright lie.
They sure did.
So they had proof he hadn't gone home. He'd been pulled over by the police a couple hours later. So while in Alabama, the detectives interviewed Sean Littlefield, the friend who had moved down from Maine with Gorman. And Sean said that Gorman had him stop at the pavilion before they left Portland to ask them if they had any cameras. He also asked an establishment across the street if they had any outdoor cameras. Then, after the Portland paper published that Gorman had not taken Amy to the pavilion, Gorman changed his story. And that's when he said his roommates had killed Amy and he was so afraid of them that he told them where to bury her and didn't go to police, although of course he wanted to.
Right.
Yeah. So there was a family friend in her 30s who'd really known Russ Gorman since he was a child. And she was interviewed by detectives and revealed that Gorman had confessed to her about killing Amy. Gorman had told this woman that he had killed Amy in a fit of rage. Then he realized he'd done something really bad, so he cleaned her up and buried her behind his mother's house. So this woman was thought to be maybe a good witness, but it turns out she had a lot of issues in her past, including some drugs and other crimes, so she wasn't really that great of a witness, it turns out.
Back in Maine, a memorial was held for Amy after her body had been officially identified. Amy was remembered as a generous and loving person. People who had loved her shared stories about Amy. She had been extremely generous with her time, and she had even taken money from a savings account to help a friend in need. And throughout the investigation, women would come forward to tell police that they had had non-consensual sex with Russ Gorman. And their stories were all the same, dismally the same. Gorman had given them a drink. They woke up with no memory of what had happened. Now these stories match what Ryan Campbell had told them about Gorman using drugs to get women into bed. One woman, after a forced sexual encounter with Gorman, told her girlfriends about it. And their response was to shake their heads and say, join the club. So he has a pretty good rep, doesn't he?
Isn't that sad, though, that was happening and no one felt like they could get help for that?
I know.
Really sad. But, if you're out drinking and this happens to you, aside from feeling shame, which a lot of women do, you also feel like, well, no one's going to believe you. And plus, you don't really know what happened exactly. So it's really an insidious thing.
It is.
So in each case, these women didn't make a report with police. Gorman was skilled at picking women who had low self-esteem or who would be afraid to speak up. And women were also coming forward now with stories of how he behaved when women rejected his advances. So if a woman wasn't drugged and didn't want to have sex with him, that would really piss him off. One woman described how he had trapped her and pushed her up against a wall when she said she wasn't going to have sex with him. And he also had a history of violence in his long-term relationships, like with his pregnant girlfriend.
Yeah, he wasn't nice to her.
No. Well, even his mother, his grandmother, he was, just violent to women.
He's a violent guy.
Yeah.
So Gorman was returned to Maine and is held in the Cumberland County Jail for probation violations. And on January 2nd, 2002, he admitted to the probation violations and was sentenced to 90 days in jail. Before he got released, the detectives wanted to be sure that he was under indictment for Amy's murder. His profile definitely suggested to police that he could kill again.
Oh, absolutely, especially after the standoff. That's craziness.
Yeah, that's just nut stuff.
Yeah, that is. So the prosecution wanted to have a grand jury meet so they could get Tammy Westbrook's testimony on the record as soon as possible. And they'd heard the details of the confession from the old neighbor, Mary Young, and also from the priest, Fred Basil. But they had no direct information from Gorman's mother because she wasn't saying anything. So they really needed to get her on record talking about the confession he made to her. So in February, Tammy was served a grand jury subpoena, and she was told that Mary Young and Father Basil would also be testifying. Also, she was told that her conversation with the priest was not privileged. So she was subpoenaed for the grand jury, but then she refused to testify, and the prosecutors took her to a Superior Court justice who told her that she was obligated to testify truthfully. So she was given an opportunity to consult an attorney.
Yeah, and after viewing the interviews with the priest and Mary Young, and after an attorney advised her that she really had no right to refuse to testify, Tammy Westbrook went before the grand jury. She was told that she would be subject to prosecution for perjury. So tell the truth. She had 2 young children still living at home, and she really didn't want to risk being jailed with these kids at home.
Yeah, so finally she did tell the complete truth, we believe, and this was the most dramatic part of the grand jury proceedings. And an indictment was returned for Russ Gorman for the murder of Amy St Laurent.
Yeah, so Gorman's trial was going to begin on January 10th, 2003. The attorneys needed the time to go through stacks of documents, interview witnesses, prepare exhibits, get their strategy developed. Now, it was difficult to get witnesses to cooperate with the prosecutor's office. Often they were needed to come back to Maine for the trial. And over time, it was becoming obvious that the prosecutors were going to have a major problem with Tammy Westbrook. About the time her son was transferred from the Portland jail to a prison in Warren, Maine, she also moved to Warren. She had been served with a subpoena compelling her to testify at the trial, but whenever the prosecutors contacted her about coming in for a pretrial interview, she wouldn't give a straight answer. She never did.
No, she had this pattern of getting the call and not responding, and that went on for weeks. And finally, she was told that they had to speak with her before the trial. It was 2 days after when a Portland attorney called the police to tell them that he was now representing Tammy Westbrook. And the attorney told them that she didn't want to testify at the trial. Duh. And his view was that the prosecutors shouldn't be calling her up to testify anyway because she was the suspect's mother.
Yeah.
He wanted a copy of the grand jury transcript turned over to him, but he didn't have the right to see it.
Yeah, he had no legal right whatsoever.
No. Only Gorman's defense attorney was given access to confidential documents in the case, but after some back-and-forth discussion and consulting with the presiding judge, Tammy's attorney was given a copy of her grand jury testimony. And after he got the transcript, he contacted the prosecutors again. And he had some bad news. He said it wouldn't be productive to call Tammy as a witness at her son's murder trial because now she didn't remember anything about the phone call in which he had made a confession to her.
Oh, an attack of amnesia.
Yes.
Terrible.
I hate when that happens.
Isn't it bad?
He added that Tammy didn't have any memory of the grand jury testimony. And this was a big blow to the prosecutor's case because Tammy's testimony about his confession, it was possibly the most important evidence they had.
Yeah, so the prosecutor had to decide what he would do when she came into court and said she didn't remember anything. So they wanted to get her statements into the record as evidence of a past recollection recorded. Now, the summer before, the prosecutor had done an evidence seminar for attorneys in the Attorney General's office. And while doing the research, he'd come across a case known as the Disher case. And this case addressed how to proceed if a witness claims not to remember what you've got recorded.
Yeah, so there was some talk among the prosecutors about whether to call Tammy Westbrook to the witness stand, despite this claim that she'd lost her memory. They could just take her claim at face value and introduce her testimony from the grand jury transcript, but they decided it would be better to put her on the stand.
Well, certainly more effective.
Yeah, so the decision to call her as a witness, despite her lack of memory, was also made in part because the main rules of evidence require her presence. But they also thought it was important to give the jury a chance to see her, to understand what she was going through as a parent in this situation, and to judge for themselves if she really had a memory loss, which of course they don't believe at all. So on Friday, January 10th, 2003, 15 months after Amy had disappeared, some citizens of Cumberland County were brought in to begin jury selection. They had 12 jurors and 3 alternates, and by the time the case was presented, there was a large amount of information about Gorman that had to be excluded because it was found to be prejudicial. So because of this, the jury heard little about his character or his history of violence. They didn't hear about his extensive criminal history. They didn't hear that he had assaulted his mother during a fight, that he had broken into a neighbor's house and he'd stolen guns, or that he had punched and kicked his pregnant girlfriend. Also, none of the women that Gorman had drugged and raped took the stand. And also his move to Alabama wasn't mentioned because it could look like he had fled the state and be prejudicial. So this meant the jury didn't learn about Gorman immediately getting a gun when he went to Alabama, or about Gorman using those guns to threaten a stranger in a sandwich shop parking lot. Even worse, I think, is that the jury really didn't get to learn about who Amy was in her short life. You can't really talk about that either. So they really had their hands tied in many ways.
A bit, right?
I understand it's our legal system, but it's kind of a shame they didn't get to hear that.
Well, and the judge talked to Tammy Westbrook outside of the jury's presence in order to determine if she could recall what she had testified to at the grand jury trial. And he found that Tammy could actually recall the confession. It's a miracle.
Yes, hallelujah.
She had shared it with a friend and with a priest, so the judge ruled that a jury was entitled to hear her and make a decision. The motion to quash the subpoena was denied, and Westbrook was ordered to testify.
Yeah, so while she was on the stand, the audio tape of her grand jury testimony was played. And hearing the testimony in her own words seemed really heartbreaking for her. She was in tears. She did end up testifying to the confession again about how her son had told her he had shot Amy in a rage, and how he had said that he had seen her face at the time of the murder, his mother's face.
Right.
He's just an awful guy. He's messed up.
Very. So the next person to testify was Gorman's ex-girlfriend, Jamie Belergian. She testified that she had dated him for about a year and had broken up with him in September 2001. She testified to conversations she had had with Gorman about the disappearance of Amy St Laurent. On the day after Amy disappeared, Gorman called Jamie, told her he'd met a girl downtown, gone to an after-hours party with her, taken her back downtown at the end of the night. So that's story number 1. He called Jamie again when he was in Alabama. This time he said that he hadn't dropped Amy off. He said that his roommates, Jason and Cush, had dropped her off, that they had been gone for 3 hours, and they returned with blood on their hands. Story number 2. Jamie testified that Gorman told her his roommates made him go to the police. She testified that she had a third phone call with Gorman after Amy's body was found. In this call, she asked him well, why was her body found in your backyard? And he told her that he said to Jason and Cush, the people he said were the perpetrators, they had asked him where a good place to bury a body would be, and that's where he told them.
Yeah, so after closing arguments, the jury deliberated for just about 5 hours, and Gorman was found guilty. 6 months after the verdict, at the sentencing phase of Gorman's trial, Amy's family finally had their chance to tell the court what Gorman's violent act had done to them, and also what the world had lost when he took Amy away. She was a good person. Amy's little sister Julie spoke about how it was for her for the 2 months while she was missing, and she said that there was no place she could go where she wouldn't see the missing posters. She talked about driving down the road past the spot where Amy had been buried, and how she's never been able to travel that route again after knowing that her sister's body had been buried there. She told the court when she lost her big sister, she also lost her best friend. And Amy's dad, Dennis St. Laurent, said that Amy had been a loving and caring person who of course didn't deserve what Gorman had done to her, and he reminded the court that Gorman had never shown any remorse for his crime. And the last person to give a victim impact statement was Amy's mom, Diane Jenkins. She wanted everyone to know who Amy was because up until then, she'd just really been seen as a victim on a poster. She described Amy and her personality and what a really remarkable young woman she was. Amy had loved her family and friends, and she was very caring and loyal. So people were attracted to My because she cared about them and was a genuine person. And she really wanted to do some good in the world. So her loss had changed everything for those who had loved her. And she went on to explain all the ways that the loss of Amy had hurt so many people, especially her family. Diane said that she had endured every parent's worst nightmare.
So Gorman was sentenced to 60 years in prison, and his appeals to this point have all been denied. Diane created the Amy St Laurent Foundation with the goal to help arrest and convict violent offenders, to provide help to the victims of violence, and to help women avoid violence. This foundation that was started brought RAD, Rape Aggression Defense, courses to the Portland area by training a group of Portland officers to teach the classes. The courses teach basic self-defense, risk reduction and avoidance, and safety awareness to women.
And I think this is a great thing. I mean, especially young women in college, it's a great thing to have some of these skills. And it isn't all just fighting skills. It's, ways to behave, how to avoid risks, things like that.
Right.
So really a good deed that Amy's mom has done here. Just trying to save another family from what she had suffered. Diane also spoke to high school students at a Give Back the Night safety forum that was sponsored by the Junior League. Amy's case also left a big impression on law enforcement. James K. Laughlin, a former assistant chief of police for the city of Portland, and author Kate Clark Flora, wrote a book about Amy's case titled Finding Amy, A True Story of Murder in Maine. And I would definitely recommend reading this book, especially if you're interested in the police work involved in putting such a complicated case together. It has really in-depth information about the investigation, about the trial preparation, and even the trial itself. I mean, it pretty much goes through the trial, sentence by sentence almost. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, it's really a good read. So that's one of our sources. And also there's a disappeared episode, season 1, episode 3, titled A Fateful Meeting. And Diane Jenkins, Amy's mom, has a website, the Amy St Laurent Foundation website, where you can read more about the good work she's doing. We also looked through the Portland Press Herald newspaper archives. TCB's music was written and produced by Tristan Capel. And I just have a couple of housekeeping notes from our Tie Grabber office. As you probably know, we've brought back a contest that we had a few years ago, and this is the beer review contest. All you need to do is record yourself reviewing one of your favorite beers, just as Dick does in the beginning of each of our shows. And the submissions will be judged on personality, detail, and the overall charm of the review. Not audio quality and not factual things, right? We're just more in it for the entertainment.
Correct.
So just do that in a simple voicemail or in a voice memo and you might win because the prize is a pair of Bluetooth earbuds that are waterproof and really stay in your ear nicely for exercise or whatever it is you want to do. So we really look forward to hearing your beer reviews. We've gotten quite a few good ones, so you've got some competition. But I remember last time we did this, it's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy listening to them as they come in. So if you should happen to decide that you're interested in getting some more TCB episodes and giving some support to the show, we really have some good stuff coming up. So what do we have coming up for our April members only episode?
The April members only episode, or premium episode as we like to call it, is about a doctor in Boston or the Boston area who killed his wife.
These doctors killing their wives is just kind of a theme with you that's making me a little uneasy.
Yeah, I just want to keep you on your toes a little bit, you know?
Okay, so we'll do that in April, and then in May we're going to have something that's not about a doctor.
No, I promise.
Okay. So these commercial-free members-only episodes come out every month, plus there's a backlog of about 40 episodes. So if you need something to listen to, it's a good time to sign up. You can be a Tie Grabber member for as little as $4 a month. And when you join, you also get a welcome to the brewery gift, and we'll send that to you with a nice handwritten thank you note. So if you're curious or interested at all, just go to tiegrabber.com and click on subscribe, and you can learn more about it. So we're going to move on to feedback, and just a reminder, if you have a case suggestion or comments about a crime or a beer, we encourage you to send us a voicemail or an email. And our email is truecrimebrewery@tiegrabber.com. And to leave a voicemail, you just go to tiegrabber.com and click on leave a voice message or send a voice message, whatever it says.
That's all you got to do. Pretty easy.
Yeah.
Okay, I got some feedback for you, Jilly. The voicemail is a case suggestion from Jordan, who also had some other suggestions, but I'm playing his voice message because I like this one.
Hi, Dick. Hi, Jill. It's Jordan. I have a case suggestion for you. It's the case of Sam Manzi. It took place in Jackson Township, New Jersey, sometime in '97. I don't know which month and day. What happened was Sam Manzi was a troubled young man. He recently had a relationship with a pedophile and became super just crazy. One day, I believe it was in '97, he had killed a young boy named Eddie Werner. Eddie Werner was selling candy door to door and went to Sam's house. Eddie walked in with Sam, and Sam strangled Eddie with a cord, a alarm clock cord. He then proceeded to put his body into a suitcase, and I believe he buried it in the woods near his house. This case was very, 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 very disturbing. The fact of the matter is that people had seen that the system had failed, because this kid seemed to have mental illnesses, but the mental hospitals wouldn't take him, said that he was fine, but his parents disagreed. When the killings happened, his parents were absolutely livid at the system, stating that, yes, there was something wrong with our child. Yeah, and for a beer suggestion, I'm not sure what kind of beer is in that area. You could probably look it up. But, the case is Sam Manzi, and he killed Eddie Werner, who was only 11 years old at the time. And Sam Manzi was 15, or he was 14 or 15, I believe. Yeah, so they were both very young. So this is like a story of a young serial killer. Or actually not a serial killer, but a young killer. So, hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.
Well, thanks, Jordan. That sounds like a disturbing case.
It is. Here's this kid. I mean, that's what he was. He was only
15, he said.
And he's had a tough life. He was abused by a pedophile.
Right. So you kind of have some sympathy for him, but then he commits this heinous crime.
Oh, this is a horrendous
against
crime.
An 11-year-old. So it's just sad any way you look at it.
No, and from the little bit of research I've done so far, it does look like authorities dropped the ball a bit. I mean, this kid, Sam Manzi, was definitely in need of mental health evaluation.
Well, I mean, that's just a comment on where our mental health in this country is, right?
You got it.
I mean, this is over 20 years ago, but I don't think things have changed a lot in that respect. It's really hard to get mental health help for a young person. I mean, when you were doing referrals in your practice, how many child psychiatrists were available to your patients, and how long did they have to wait for an appointment?
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, we lived in an area a small town, but we were with an hour's drive of Portland, Maine, where there's a big medical center, and Boston, Massachusetts, when there's any number of medical centers. At the same time, trying to get a kid seen for mental health evaluation was almost impossible. The waiting lists are miles long, going to take forever to get the kid seen. It's just really difficult. So nothing's really changed, has it?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all, which is really sad because if we could get help, maybe we could avoid some of these crimes. I mean, I think in this case, you really can't deny that there was something going on here, probably related to trauma that the older boy had gone through.
I don't think there's much doubt about that.
Yeah. So definitely something to consider.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot for that, Jordan. And I have an email from Tracy. Tracy writes, I'd really like to hear you cover the Lindy and Azaria Chamberlain case, which was enormous back in the day in Australia and spawned many unclassy uses of a dingo has my baby since then. And this case was initially trialed by media, and I think you'll find the way things came about to be very interesting. Notably, to this day, people are still having to rescue their infants from the jaws of dingoes. However, at the time, it was unheard of and thought to be impossible, and therefore the mother must have done it. So Lindy's story, of course, is deeply saddening. A grieving woman who was accused of murdering a child she loved. There are still people in Australia to this day who believe she was responsible, which makes me think internationally the opinion must be even more so. Yes, I remember seeing a movie. Meryl Streep played this woman.
Meryl Streep was the star.
And fortunately, the movie did kind of clear her, right? It showed that it was a dingo.
Right.
Or at least suggested that. But it does seem like a weird thing to happen, and I can see how people had trouble believing it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's just such a weird story, you know?
It is, and it's one I would really like to do an episode about. So thank you, Tracy.
That's from Tracy.
Yep.
We have one more case suggestion from Christy. So Christy says, Hi, Jill and Dick. I enjoy your podcast so much. Thank you for doing it. I have a case suggestion. In August 1990, a 14-year-old named Chad Campbell killed 15-year-old Cynthia Lewis and the 17-month-old boy she was babysitting. That's Curtis Rizzo. Cynthia was stabbed 44 times. Curtis was stabbed 6 times. And their throats were also slit. Chad was arrested and convicted for the murders and is still in jail. This is so sad, so I'll understand if you don't want to cover this, but I would love to hear you both cover this story. I was only 12 at the time and lived only 2 towns away, so it had a big impact on me.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
In a strange twist, there is a rumor that Satanism was involved, and another person also, a 17-year-old named Michael Hutchinson. And this person committed suicide 3 months after the murders. But he did have an alibi. He was working at McDonald's at the time of the murders. This is most of the story, but I didn't want you to have to dig for it. I just have never heard anything about it afterwards, and that surprises me. Keep up the good work. I love beer and really enjoy the reviews also.
All right. Thank you, Christy.
Thank you very much.
So this is a little bit similar to the one that Jordan suggested in that the killer is a child.
Yes, but with this one, we don't have any prior history.
Right,
or,
so nobody
or red
thought...
flags, right?
Yeah. Well, you have to wonder.
Yeah, well,
maybe there were that we don't know about.
I haven't dug that much yet, so we'll see.
I mean, to kill a 17-month-old, something's seriously wrong with someone who can do that.
Don't you think?
Oh, my God.
I mean, you're killing the babysitter, but here's this little innocent kid.
Well, not that the babysitter was probably quite innocent as well. But yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean.
I know.
Okay.
Just really horrifying.
Definitely.
Yeah. But we'll definitely consider doing an episode about it because we really appreciate your suggestion.
Yes, thank you.
So we appreciate all suggestions and voicemails that come in. Even if we don't play them on the show, Dick tries to write back to everyone.
He tries to. He sometimes isn't real successful.
Yeah. Well.
So some people get a note, some people don't. And then there's ones that we put on air. So
yeah. And it's not that we're showing any preference. It's just that we're not that organized, really.
Well, me,
Yeah.
that person.
Yeah. But that's why I just want to say that we do appreciate everyone's suggestions and comments.
We certainly do.
So until next week, we'll see you at the quiet end.
The virtual quiet end. We'll be doing that for a while.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.